There was a man who had 2 sons, and the younger of them said to his father, Father, give me the share of property that is coming to me. And he divided his property between them. Not many days later, the younger son gathered all he had and took a journey into a far country. And there he squandered his property in reckless living. And when he had spent everything, a severe famine arose in that country, and he began to be in need. So he went and hired himself out to one of the citizens of that country, and sent him into his fields to feed pigs. And he was longing to be fed with the pods that the pigs ate, and no one gave him anything. But when he came to himself, he said, How many of my father's hired servants have more than enough bread? But I perish here with hunger. I will arise and go to my father, and I will say to him, Father, I have sinned against heaven and before you. I am no longer worthy to be called your son. Treat me as one of your hired servants. And he arose and came to his father. But while he was still a long way off, his father saw him and felt compassion, and ran and embraced him and kissed him. And the son said to him, Father, I have sinned against heaven and before you. I am no longer worthy to be called your son. But the father said to his servants, Bring quickly the best robe and put it on him, and put a ring on his hand and shoes on his feet. And bring the fattened calf and kill it. And let us eat and celebrate. For this my son was dead and is alive again. He was lost and is found. And they began to celebrate. Now his older son was in the field, and as he came and drew near to the house, he heard music and dancing. And he called one of the servants and asked what these things meant. And he said to him, Your brother has come, and your father has killed the fattened calf, because he has received him back safe and sound. But he was angry and refused to go in. His father came out and entreated him. But he answered his father, Look, these many years I have served you, and I have never disobeyed your command. Yet you never gave me a young goat that I might celebrate with my friends. And when this son of yours came, who has devoured your property with prostitutes, you killed the fattened calf for him. And he said to him, Son, you are always with me, and all that is mine is yours. It was fitting to celebrate and be glad, for this your brother was dead and is alive. He was lost and is found.
Powerful
What do you
text.
see in there, Heather?
You know, I'm struck by the prodigal son.
Mm-hmm.
I think of the places in my life that I've squandered things, or that I have lived reckless living in terms of not focusing on what I had in God's house, you know, what I have being close to him. And one of the things, as I'm looking at his story this time, that I'm noticing is this idea of when he came to himself.
Mm-hmm.
So he kind of bottomed out. You know, for some people, you know, we just keep doing the same bad thing until all of a sudden we hit rock bottom. And that's what it sounds like to me, is that as he got to that place, it said he came to himself. And at that point he realized, the insight came. I would have it so much better where I was, even if I was not a son anymore, even if I kind of gave up my birthright and my claim to who I am, if I just went back. And that takes a lot of humility. It'd almost be easier to despair and give up and die with the pigs. But there was this part of him that said, no, I have made a terrible error, but I know my father is generous. I know he's going to take me back. It just sounds like there was something in him that moved into confession, and really before God and his father, and that allowed him then to make that trip back.
This phrase, he came to himself, it's almost like the phrase could be he came to the end of himself.
Yes.
You know, it's like the end of all his stuff. And I wonder something about that action where he is in the pig pen. And this might be a little bit of a scandalous thing to think, but I just kind of wonder, and I'll find out in heaven when we ask Jesus the meaning of this. I wonder if what happens in the prodigal son's heart is actually true repentance. The reason I wonder that is there he is at the end of himself, and he remembers the only source of provision, really, that's been consistent in his life is his father. He got his inheritance from his father. Yeah. And I just kind of wonder if maybe this is a scheme to get more out of his father. he rehearses the speech. I'll go to my dad and I'll say I was a sinner and I don't deserve it. And I just kind of wonder if maybe even in his depravity, he's thinking, how can I get even more out of my dad? Now, I don't know if that's the case, but if it is, then all the more grace that his father showed him.
Well said.
Either way, whether he's got real confession in his heart or not, the father says, come here. Just bring it in for a hug, and I'll just come home, and you will receive my blessing, whether it's true repentance or not. That's good news for someone like me, who sometimes tries to scheme my way back into God's favor.
That's great.
That's good. And in verse 20, it says, but while he was still a long way off, his father saw him. Just this picture of the father being there, waiting, and even from a far distance, it's like he was searching for, he was waiting for his son to come home. He was being active in his waiting. He wasn't just, it wasn't a surprise. And when he finally saw him, it was all this compassion and love filled him that he just ran to him. And this overwhelming love and mercy just covered this prodigal son, which I think is such a beautiful picture of the father heart of God.
Yes.
And, what really stood out to me about this text is the older son and the younger son. The older son, he's doing all the right things. He never left the house. He was really a good, obedient son.
Right.
But yet his response to the brother coming back home really shows his heart. But what it really reveals is that both sons did not have an accurate perception of their father. They didn't believe he was a good father. The younger son didn't think so. That's why he took all his inheritance money early and left. And the older brother, too, did not think he was a good father because he's saying, listen, my friends and I, when we wanted to, party, you wouldn't even give us a young goat. And so he had this mindset that his father was sort of like an employer or a slave master in some ways, not a father figure. So I just thought that was interesting to me.
I noticed too. Oh, did you want to say something?
I just said both missed the mark.
Both
in terms
sons
of
did.
understanding.
Yeah. I noticed the sacrificial love of the father. He says, bring out the best robe, and in Jesus' time, wearing your best robe would be a way to tell the community how important you are. It's like a robe of righteousness. And for him to cover his son with the best robe would have been actually sacrificial. His neighbors would have looked at that and said, he's taking off his best robe and he's going to waste it. And then when I think about that, I picture this young son coming up the road, and what are the clothes he's wearing? I mean, he's literally just been in a pig pen. Imagine what is just kind of caked onto his clothes. And that's a picture of us in our sin.
Yeah.
They're filthy rags, it says in the Bible. And God sacrificially sends Jesus. What does Jesus do? He takes off his robe of righteousness. And what robe did he put on himself on the cross? It was a mocking robe. So he gives us this exchange of robes, our filthy rags for his robe of righteousness. That's good news for all of us who are to be received into God's eternal kingdom.
Amen.